that I'm going to forget to mention towards the end of the day, so I'm going to bring it up now, and we're going to be looking into it a little bit more, is next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, apparently graduations are being held at the Civic Center. And people may be parking in the same parking lot that you park in. We're trying to find when those are scheduled, but they're maybe starting at 8 in the morning and going on. So that raises two issues. One, there may be fewer parking spaces, and you may get there and find the lot to be full and need to find some other place to park. I don't know whether that's going to be the case, but that's a possibility. Secondly, there may be times when there's a lot of cars trying to park at the same time to get to a graduation. We're going to try to find the schedule of those graduations, because it may be that our start time is between two start times of graduations, and the traffic may not be the problem. But I just want to bring that to your attention, because it may mean you need to leave home a little bit earlier to make sure we get here on time, things of that sort. So, and I'll try to give you more details later on when if we get some more information on it before the end of the day. All right. That being said, Mr. Latour, is there further evidence for the state?
Yes, Your Honor. The state would call Agent Whitley.
But the tools to help you guide.
I do.
Thank you.
Latour?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Agent Whitley. After you get a moment to get comfortable, if you'll introduce yourself to the jury.
My name's David Whitley. I'm an agent with the State Bureau of Investigation.
And how long have you been an agent with the State Bureau of Investigation?
I've been an agent since May of 2000.
And did you do anything before that?
Prior to that, I worked in local law enforcement for the Hickory Police Department for 5 years.
And what's your role with the SBI?
I'm currently assigned to the Northwestern District of the SBI. It's located in Hickory. I am a special agent, but my rank is Assistant Special Agent in Charge. I have managerial duties with a team of agents. I have some administrative duties and also investigative duties.
And what do you mean by you have investigative duties?
I also am assigned cases.
Okay. And we kind of heard some testimony earlier in the week about the SBI and how you get cases. Can you tell us what your understanding of how the SBI gets cases is?
Sure. The SBI is an assisting agency largely. We do have original jurisdiction in certain types of cases like drug investigations. But if it's a homicide case, a public corruption case, police shooting case, some of the cases that the SBI spends a lot of time on, those are usually requester cases. We are requested to enter the case by a district attorney's office, by a head of agency like a sheriff or a chief of police. A judge can ask us to enter a case.
Okay. And at some point, if you are aware, did the SBI get involved of an investigation involving what eventually became Craig Blitzer, Cindy Blitzer, and Wallace Bradsher?
Yes. Back in July of 2016, I was assigned to the Special Investigations Unit. That is the first time that I heard about this case. I worked in the unit under a SAC named Gayle Pede. Mr. Perry, he notified me on July 14th of 16 that there was an investigation that I was going to be assigned. It was currently being looked at in a preliminary investigation by ASAC Danny Mays.
And without telling me what they said, obviously, what's your understanding of what the investigation was to involve at that point for you?
Sure. My understanding was the investigation was going to be centered on whether the wife of Rockingham County District Attorney Craig Blitzer, the wife being Cindy Blitzer, whether Miss Blitzer was actually working the hours that she was being paid as an investigator in that DA's in a DA's office adjacent the person Caswell DA's office.
All right. And did you get with Agent Mays to discuss an investigation or the investigation into this matter?
I did. I believe I spoke with Agent Mays the next day by telephone.
And when you spoke with Agent Mays, were you informed of the progress of the investigation?
He did tell me the investigative activity that he had conducted up to that point.
And did you review his notes and paperwork at some point?
At some point I did.
Okay. When you spoke to Agent Mays, did you have any information about the validity of this investigation that you guys were going to take part in?
Objection to that conclusion, the validity.
I'm sorry.
The validity, the conclusion that he made an opinion there was validity to the investigation.
Sustained.
At the time you spoke to to Agent Mays, did you have an opinion as to, based on the information you had been provided, as to whether or not this was something that you were going to look into?
When I initially spoke with Agent Mays, the investigative activity that he had conducted up to that point was such that the SBI realized that it was something that was going to have to be investigated. It appeared that there was enough information to warrant an investigation, and that's why the case was being switched from that preliminary status under Agent Mays in the Greensboro office to the Special Investigations Unit.
Okay. And when you say switch from that preliminary stage to the Greensboro unit, can you describe for us what you're talking about?
Yeah, so the SBI is allowed to do, even if we do not have original jurisdiction in something, we are allowed to look into issues to determine whether a situation needs to be investigated. And then that information would be brought to whatever body would have jurisdiction. Normally, it is the district attorney for the county that the action is occurring in.
When you say normally, is there an obvious reason probably why this didn't occur in this case?
Yes, the action was actually occurring in the district attorney's jurisdiction that actually was involved in the case.
Okay. And so as a result of that, what was your next course of action?
So Agent Mays spoke with me by phone. I believe it was on the 15th of July. And then we actually he was going to schedule a meeting with the Superior Court judge of, I believe it was Caswell County, Judge Osmond Smith. And we were to brief Judge Osmond Smith on ASAC Mays' activity in the case up to that point.
And were you a part of that briefing?
I was.
And did you brief him, or did Agent Mays do that?
Agent Mays conducted the briefing.
As a result of that briefing, what information, or what was your next course of conduct?
Judge Smith decided that he had a conflict since that was his county and he knew the parties involved. I don't recall how I gained this knowledge, but at some point that week I learned that a judge who was based in Statesville, a judge named Crosswhite, was going to be accepting the case to review, and if he found that an investigation was warranted, he would be the requesting judge in the case.
All right. And when you got that information about Judge Crosswhite, what'd you do?
Well, I waited for Judge Crosswhite's call.
All right. At some point, did Judge Crosswhite call you?
He actually didn't. I went by his office that Friday to try to see if I could meet with him. Sometimes they have free hours on Fridays, less court. He was not in his office, but he did call me the next day.
And when Judge Crosswhite called you, what'd you do?
I basically gave him the same information that Agent Mays had given me, the activity that he had conducted up to that point. I asked Judge Crosswhite to, I don't think Judge Crosswhite may have had gone through this before where he requested an investigation. And so I told him what my understanding was of the process, and he told me that he would get us a letter of request.
Okay. And so you provided, is what you're saying, you provided him with the same or substantially similar information as what you guys had provided to Judge Smith?
That is correct. And also, Agent Mays, I believe, did send him either an email or talk with him by phone, maybe both, I don't recall. But he did provide some information also.
Okay. Now, when you provide information to a judge in this type of circumstance, is it something that you tell the judge what you're going to investigate, or the judge tells you what the scope of the investigation will be?
Yeah, exactly. We provide the judge with the facts as we see them up to that point, and then the judge would say, yes, go do this, and he would set the parameters of whatever investigation, if an investigation would be ordered, he would set the parameters of the investigation.
Do you know if at some point Judge Crosswhite instructed you and the SBI to conduct an investigation?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do you know if at some point after you met with Judge Crosswhite, if he instructed the SBI that he wanted an investigation to occur?
Yes, he did request an investigation.
And were you assigned to that investigation?
I was.
And do you know what the parameters of your investigation were to be at that time at the direction of Judge Crosswhite?
The investigation was to concentrate on either showing that Cindy Blitzer did work the hours she was being paid for, or she didn't work the hours she was being paid for. Also, we were to determine any level of involvement by her supervisor, ultimate supervisor, Wallace Bradsher, and also a co-worker who was entering or approving her beacon time, Jay Stoltz.
All right. And a name I didn't hear you mention there is Craig Blitzer.
Yes, sir.
Is there a reason for that?
Well, at that point, we did not have a whole lot of information on exposure by Craig Blitzer. He obviously was not Cindy Blitzer's supervisor on paper. That's why he was not originally indexed as a subject of the investigation. And we knew that at some point, if we received information, the judge could be briefed on that, and that could change.
All right. And when you got your kind of marching orders from Judge Crosswhite at that point, what was the first thing that you did?
So I suppose the first thing that I did was meet with my supervisor, make sure that the administration was aware of the investigation, the administration was aware of the investigative path that we plan to take in the case. And then as far as investigative activity, I believe the first thing that I did was reach back out to AOC, to Debbie Tant, who had already been spoken to, but we wanted to refresh the information she had given and make sure that before we jumped right into this, Ms. Blitzer was putting in hours worked, and she had not taken some sort of leave since the last time it was looked at, that type thing.
All right. Now, before you go speak to Debbie Tant, also goes by Debbie Watkins, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You said she had already been spoken to. She'd been spoken to by Mays?
Yes, sir.
Now, are you aware if at some point in your involvement towards the beginning of this investigation, Agent Mays retires?
He does.
How quickly into the investigation is that?
Very quickly. I believe we received the letter of request from the judge the 1st of August, And I believe Agent May's last day was the end of August.
All right.
So,
Now, when you reach out to, or when Agent Mays resigns from, retires, does he provide you with a synopsis of his notes and/or any other documentation?
he does provide me with a typed document, which was eventually attached to the case file. As I recall, it may have been paragraph format or bullet format, but it was just kind of an overall general synopsis of what he had done in the case up to that point.
Okay. And you reviewed that?
I did.
And was it helpful to you in your investigation?
It was.
Using that and other investigative means, you decided to go to Debbie Tant again, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. And when you go out and reach out to Debbie Tant, does she provide you with information?
She does.
And is the information what's the information that she provides you about?
The information I received was that basically Cindy Blitzer was still entering her time. In general, it was 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. She was not on some sort of extended leave. And I believe also I learned that her hours had not been approved in the system. She had only input the hours.
When was this meeting with Debbie Tant? Approximately.
Well, it would have been the beginning of August.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure of which day.
Okay. Maybe August the 8th.
That sounds right.
All right. Of 2016?
Yes, sir.
All right. When you talk to her, does she give you documentation at that point, or what's the nature of that discussion?
I do believe I received a beacon printout from her showing the hours.
All right. After you was there anything else of note in that conversation or investigation with Debbie Tant that you recall right this second?
No, I don't believe so.
All right. After you talked with Ms. Tant, what's the next thing that you do?
I believe the next activity was I either contacted or was contacted by a member of the Rockingham County District Attorney's Office who had some information, and one of his coworkers had some information that he wanted to provide.
Okay. Do you know who that was?
Yes, sir. That was Mr. Ramey and Mr. Morrow.
Okay. And did you speak with them?
I did.
And when you spoke with them, what was the next thing that you did?
The next thing that I did was I set up an appointment with Wallace Bradsher to speak with him and go ahead and start the investigative process.
All right. Now, you testified earlier that one of the people that you're ultimately looking at in this case is Wallace Bradsher.
That is correct.
And you reach out to Wallace Bradsher fairly early on in this investigation?
That's true.
Why would you do that?
Maybe I should explain my unit. The reason my unit worked this case was the Special Investigations Unit is tasked with working public corruption cases involving elected officials, head of agencies, and as part of the protocol for my unit, we don't ambush the elected official. We don't go in and bring a bunch of agents into the office and do a bunch of interviews at one time and be disruptive. We set up an appointment with the official, notify them of the investigation, and that's what I did in this case.
Okay. Well, did you just show up and meet with Wallace Bradsher, or did you reach out to him before you did that?
No, I actually telephoned Mr. Bradsher. I called him a couple of times, eventually speaking with him a week or so before the actual interview date, and we agreed upon a date to meet.
Now, when you reach out to him, before you get up with him, do you tell him who you are and what this is about, or what's the nature of those?
Yes, sir. So I telephoned probably on the 10th.
10th of what month?
I believe that was August.
Okay.
And I did leave a message, but I didn't get a call back. And then I don't remember the exact date, but maybe a week or so later, maybe as much as 2 weeks later, I call him back. And then maybe a day after that, I received a call from him. When I did speak with him.
Well, let me ask you before you get to that. On August the 10th, you say you left a message. Do you let him know what this is in reference to?
No, sir. Actually, I spoke with the either the administrative assistant or someone else in the office that answered the phone. And it's kind of hard to explain that telephone call. So I just asked if he would call me back and left my name and number. There was no reason left. And then I didn't receive a call back on that date. And then the next time that I spoke with administrative assistant or someone in the office, I again just gave my name and asked that he call me back. Once he called me back, I did tell him the purpose for my call.
Okay, so you call on around the 10th, leave a message, don't hear back. You call back again maybe a week or so later, leave another message, don't hear back. And then a day later, he calls you, or you leave a message.
Yeah, and then he called
calls
me
you-
back the next day.
He calls you the next day. Okay. So you leave 2 messages. On the second message, the next day, he calls you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, during that telephone conversation, you say that you told him what this was about.
Yes, sir.
What would that have been? What would you have told him at that point?
I told him that we had received a complaint. The complaint was that a member of his staff, Cindy Blitzer, was not showing up to work. She was being paid for hours that she was not working. And I would like to come talk with him about it, and I would like to conduct interviews with some of his staff.
Okay.
And I'm, of course, paraphrasing. I don't remember the exact conversation, but that's the type of thing I would have said.
Okay. You would have at least given him the Cliff Notes version of the investigation or what you're looking for.
Yes, and I don't recall. I could have gone into greater detail. I don't remember.
Could have gone into greater detail. Would you have gone into less detail?
I don't think I could get out of that conversation with less detail than that. So,
All right. Well, why do you say that?
well, if you say there's a complaint on someone in your office, the SBI is calling, you have to give some information for it to make sense. So,
All right. And what was the result of that conversation?
we set up an appointment for me to meet with him.
When was that appointment to be?
It was whatever the interview date is for him. I believe that was September 6th, maybe.
Okay, September the 6th of 2016.
Yes, sir.
In between that early August conversation with the defendant and this September the 6th meeting, what are you doing?
I don't recall.
Okay, are you doing things relating to this case?
May have typed my notes from the previous two interviews with Morrow and Ramey. I I could have been working on other cases that I was assigned. I just don't recall.
All right. On September the 6th of 2016, you go and you sit down with the defendant?
That's correct.
All right. And we'll get to that. You have a conversation with him?
I do.
Okay. We'll get to that conversation in just a few moments. What else where is that conversation?
I met with him at the Person County District Attorney's office.
And when you meet with the defendant at the Person County District Attorney's office, after you have, or before you meet with him, do you do anything there? Meet with anybody else?
Before I leave there, I do interview a couple of the employees.
Okay, what about before you meet with the defendant?
At the District Attorney's office?
Yeah.
I don't think I did anything.
Okay. So the first order of business is to meet with the elected DA, as is your protocol.
Yes, sir.
And then after you've met with the defendant, you meet with some other people.
That's correct.
Who did you recall meeting with on that occasion?
I interviewed Miss Pede, and it seems like I interviewed a couple other people. I don't recall exactly who all interviewed.
Okay. Do you recall if you interviewed Tyler Henderson on that occasion?
No, sir.
You don't recall, or you did not?
No, I did not. I did not interview Tyler that day.
Okay. Why didn't you interview Tyler Henderson on that occasion?
Well, my goal that day was to interview people that would have worked with Miss Blitzer, and to my knowledge, at that point, the information I had was that they didn't work together.
Okay. And why was that your goal, to interview the people that have supposedly worked with Cindy Blitzer?
Because the investigative path that I wanted to take was to document any work that Cindy Blitzer may have actually done. Interviews with people who have worked with her could document the work that she did.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. When you plan an interview, or you plan an investigation, okay, do you plan out how you want to investigate certain things, or do you just come at it kind of haphazard or willy-nilly?
No, you do pick an investigative pathway. A lot of times, agents, officers will develop a lead sheet, and that lead sheet prioritizes what you want to do in the investigation.
Okay.
And as you do it, you check off the name on the lead sheet.
Why do you do a lead sheet?
It keeps you on task. It makes you more efficient.
Now, if something is not on your lead sheet that you discover throughout the course of your investigation, do you then just ignore that, or do you add that to another section of your sheet?
No, names and tasks are added to the lead sheet all the time. And of course, you have to evaluate it as you receive additional information. Things may be added to the lead sheet. Things may be removed from the lead sheet.
All right. And you had done one of these, or you had considered this process before you go to meet with Wallace Bradsher on the 6th?
I had considered the process mentally. It was so early in the investigation, though, I don't believe we had actually developed a lead sheet.
Well, when you initially go to the Person County DA's office in September, do you think this is going to be a one-time process, or is this a continuing sort of thing for you?
When I went to the Person County office, I realized I was going to have to go back to the office again. I realized I was going to have to meet with Mr. Bradsher again. It was going to take a while to complete this process.
Okay. So when you get there on September the 6th and discover this, does that kind of change your process?
I don't follow.
Your lead sheet process? Did you go in there thinking this is going to be a one-day event, and it turned into a multiple-day event for you?
Well, I don't think I really went into the office with a preconceived notion. It could have gone one way, it could have gone another. it just depends on the information that you receive.
Okay, and when you got there, it went the direction that you thought it was going to require more than one session.
Yeah, I did think that it was going to require more than one session, but by the same token, we kept an open mind. I could have gone in and been given information that Ms. Blitzer was working, and that would have shortened my lead sheet.
Okay. If it could have been shown to you at that occasion, look, this is all nonsense. She's been working. You would have taken that evidence at that point, and it might have changed your investigative tactic.
Yes, sir. If we had received that, it would have probably initiated a report to the judge, who could have even shut the investigation down.
Did that happen as a result of your meetings in the Person County DA's office in September of 2016?
No, sir.
So then, as a result of your meeting with the defendant, did you have to track down other leads?
I did.
Okay. And were some of those leads that you had to track down a direct result of your conversations with the defendant?
They were.
And what types of things did you have to track, without right now telling me what he said, what types of things did you have to track down in order to follow up from that interview?
So from that interview, I gained the knowledge that there were a number of individuals that could have worked with Cindy Blitzer. All of those names had to be interviewed. I received information that this could have been an arrangement through the state bar, that this could have been something maybe sanctioned by the ethics committee. Those were all leads that now had to be run down. It also, since we weren't really able to nail down a location, a firm location for her activity, I also had to expand that out to interview the employees of the Caswell County District Attorney's Office, and then ultimately the employees that could have worked with her at the Rockingham County District Attorney's Office.
All right. So did you go do a bunch of interviews?
Yes, sir. Over the next couple of weeks, yes.
All right. And as a result of that meeting with the defendant, did you interview Holly McAdams?
Yes, sir.
Did you interview Jay Stoltz?
Yes, sir.
Did you interview Hugh Williford?
Yes, sir.
Elisa Black?
Yes, sir.
Gayle Pede?
Yes, sir.
How about Debbie Hallbrook?
She was interviewed by another agent initially. I was present, and then she was also interviewed later.
All right. And at some point, maybe not necessarily as a result of this interview, or was it, did you interview Cindy and Craig Blitzer?
Yes.
As a result of all of this, did you attempt to interview Tyler Henderson?
We did make attempts to interview Mr. Henderson later in the investigation.
And during the course of your investigation and your attempts to interview Tyler Henderson, would he agree to talk to you?
He declined the interview.
Okay. Now, when you interviewed Gayle Pede, was that on September the 6th of 2016?
Yes, sir.
So the day after, or the day of your meeting with the defendant, you then go out and interview Gayle Pede?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as a result of your conversation with Gayle Pede, what'd you learn?
I learned that Ms. Blitzer was employed by the Person Caswell office, but her day-to-day activities were not in the Person Caswell office. She could be working from the Rockingham office. She could be working from home.
Those were coulds. Was she able to tell you where Cindy Blitzer was working?
No, sir, not really.
Okay. Did you find out who was supposed to be approving Cindy Blitzer's time?
Yes, sir. I learned that ADA Jay Stoltz was to approve Miss Blitzer's time.
Did you learn if ADA Jay Stoltz approved anyone else's time in the Person or Caswell County offices?
I don't believe at that time he approved anyone else's.
Okay. And you heard her testimony here today?
I did.
Were the things that she relayed to you pretty much what she told the jury?
Yes, sir.
Same topics?
Yes, sir.
Okay. From there, you interviewed some other people there in the office. Is that fair to say?
We did. I did conduct a couple of interviews that day. I don't remember off the top of my head how many we did. There were a lot of interviews conducted in the case.
Okay. Did you interview personally Craig Blitzer?
I did.
I want to talk to you a little bit about Craig Blitzer's interview with you, okay? Do you remember if you talked to Craig or Cindy Blitzer first?
I don't.
I'm sorry?
I don't.
Okay. Now, this interview with Craig and Cindy Blitzer is sometime later, right?
It is.
And you've already had a couple interviews with some folks from the defendant's office, right?
That's correct.
Have you interviewed some folks from Craig Blitzer's office?
That is correct.
All right. And when you sit down to talk to Craig Blitzer, would that have been in May of 2017?
It was.
Had you tried to interview Craig Blitzer before that?
I had contacted Mr. Blitzer. We did speak by telephone tag. I believe I actually was able to get him one day. He answered his phone, but he was not able to speak with me. Then we had telephone tag with voicemail back and forth, and then ultimately I received a call from his attorney, Mike Grace.
Now, when would that have been? Approximately. I mean, I know he does this interview. You say
I know that I started trying to get in touch with him probably about a week after speaking with the people in the Person Caswell office. So that would have been the week after the 6th, somewhere around there.
Okay, early September.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how about trying to sit down with Cindy Blitzer?
I believe I asked, I don't remember if Mike Grace told me at the same time that he was going to not submit them for interviews at that point, or whether I asked for Mr. Blitzer first or Miss Blitzer first. I don't recall, but ultimately he told me that he was going to hold off on submitting them for interviews at that point.
Okay. At some point, all of this investigation comes out in the papers or in the media, correct?
It does.
And is it early on in the investigation that happens?
It's fairly early on, yes.
Is it before you're trying to set up these meetings or after?
It seems like the first newspaper articles I recall were around the time I was in the middle of speaking with the people, the employees of the Rockingham office.
Okay. So that would have been the second week or so of September?
Objection to the leading.
Overruled.
That's the general time frame.
Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit, and I know we're jumping around some as far as timing, but looking at Craig Blitzer's statement, well, I'm looking at it and you remembering it, do you remember talking to him eventually about this circumstance?
I do.
And do you remember where that happened?
The interview was conducted at the Wake County District Attorney's office here.
Okay. And as a result, or, you know, you do these interviews, what's the SBI do about recording the interviews?
Well, this type of case, we would not record the interviews. There are some investigations that by law, law enforcement is required to record the interviews. There are some investigations by policy, the SBI is required to record interviews, like police shootings of certain witnesses. In this case, it is against SBI policy to record the interview, or at least it was at that time.
Okay. And when you sit down to meet with a witness, do you take handwritten notes?
I do.
Okay. And what do you do with your handwritten notes?
So the handwritten notes serve to refresh your memory of the interview, and you type up your handwritten notes into a report format.
Now, are your reports verbatim?
No, sir.
Why not?
I don't really know why the SBI elected to do it the way they elected, but I can tell you the reason I do it the way I do it is because it's the way I was taught, and it's SBI policy.
Okay. And so, what's the purpose of your reports or your notes?
The purpose of the notes and the report is to memorialize the interview, provide investigative leads for furthering the investigation, and provide a record of the interview for court and for discovery.
Okay. And so you did that for all these witnesses that you've met with?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Some of them longer than others?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, when you sat down with Craig Blitzer, did you talk to him about his general history?
I did get some background information on him.
Okay. Including the makeup, or did your questions include the makeup of his office?
It did.
And do you recall if you asked him who worked there?
I did.
Was he able to provide any information to you about who worked at his office?
He did.
And at some point, did you talk to him about running for office?
I did.
Do you recall if he was able to provide you with a reason why he decided to run for office?
I'm sure he did, but I don't specifically recall.
Okay. Do you recall if he told you about any...
Objection. Or in the alternative, ask for corroborative instruction.
All right, so, ladies and gentlemen, the testimony that you're receiving is an out-of-court statement that's being recounted by this. It's being received solely for the purposes for you to consider it for corroboration or impeachment purposes of a witness who has already testified in this case. So that's the limited purpose that you can consider it, not the truth of what was said in that out-of-court statement. Go ahead, sir.
Do you remember if Mr. Blitzer ever told you about a conversation before he ran for district attorney between he and the defendant?
He did.
Can you tell us about that conversation as you recall it?
He said that he had some concerns about the income he would be receiving as a district attorney. He relayed the information that a defense attorney, his salary may be significantly higher than a district attorney. And he was worried that he may not be able to make ends meet. He told of how he spoke with Wallace Bradsher, and how Wallace Bradsher said that he had his wife employed. Craig could employ his wife, and that would increase their salary.
Okay. And do you recall did he tell you when that conversation occurred as it relates to him deciding to run for office?
I don't remember if we noted a time frame, but it would have been prior to him running for office.
Okay. And at some point, did he tell you that he ran for office and was elected district attorney?
He did.
Did he ever discuss with you his hiring of his wife once he was elected to be the district attorney of Rockingham County?
He did.
Can you tell me a little bit about the circumstances that he told you about that?
In general, he said that he did hire his wife, Cindy Blitzer. They took office the beginning of January 2015. They set about putting the office in order.
Okay. Did he ever tell you if there ever came to be a problem with him employing his wife?
He did.
And when he told you about that, what did he tell you?
He basically said that he was contacted. He believed, I believe he said it was someone with AOC. They said you can't hire your wife. There were policies against it, and that was the situation.
Did he tell you what he did when he learned about the fact that he couldn't employ his wife?
He said that he contacted Wallace Bradsher, who also employed his wife.
Okay, and did he tell you anything about that conversation?
He said that basically Mr. Bradsher said that he was going to try to work something out, maybe get some sort of exemption.
Okay. And at some point, did he tell you if they were able to get an exemption?
He said that they did not get an exemption.
When they did he tell you in the interim time between finding this out and learning that they did not get an exemption, did anything change with the employment of his wife in his office?
Yes, he said that they basically decided that they would switch the employment of their wives. Miss Bradsher would go to work for the Rockingham County office, and Miss Blitzer would go to work for the Caswell County office.
And did he tell you about any meetings between he and the defendant as they related to that job switching for the wives?
He did.
What did he tell you about that?
He said that basically they met at a restaurant in Reedsville, discussed how they would move forward, how they needed to fill out paperwork. And I think he also couched it as it was just a way for them to reconnect with each other. Maybe some of them had not met the other, that type thing.
Okay. Did he ever tell you any conversations that they had about his wife and nursing school at that lunch meeting?
Yeah, Mr. Blitzer did say that he disclosed that Miss Blitzer was not looking to retire with the state. He indicated that she wanted to pursue education in nursing and ultimately go into nursing.
Did he say if the defendant offered to help his wife out with that?
He did.
And what did he tell you about that?
He said that the Wallace Bradsher indicated he might be able to help Miss Blitzer to get into a final class to graduate from a program that she had already started.
Did he tell you if any of that worked out?
He said that basically it did not work out.
All right. Now, at some point, did he tell you that this switch actually occurs?
He did.
Okay. And in moving forward from that, did he tell you about Pam Bradsher working in his office?
He did.
Okay. And he told you, did he tell you about Cindy working in the Caswell County office?
He did.
Did he ever relay to you or recount to you any information about his wife still working for the Caswell County office and returning to his office to work?
He did.
Generally, what did he tell you about that?
He said that he had approached or talked with Wallace Bradsher about the fact that Cindy may not have she may not have time during the day to take their son to school in Greensboro Day School and still drive that far across the counties and then come back. And it was also gas issues. I know I didn't say that all that eloquently, but it was a number of issues: gas issues, the price of gas, time involved in driving. There may have even been something about inadequate office space, that type of thing.
All right. And did he tell you that that actually occurs and she comes back and is working in his office?
He did.
Did he tell you at that point if she being Cindy, had any dealings with his office as far as him being her supervisor or anyone in his office being her supervisor?
Yes, he said that he was very careful not to give her direction to separate himself from her supervision.
Okay. Did he tell you if she was working on Caswell County cases or Rockingham County cases?
He said that she did work on some conflict cases, most notably the Shockley case.
Okay. And the Shockley case, we've heard some testimony about that. Did he recount how she would work on the Shockley case to you?
He did.
What kind of stuff did he tell you about that?
Basically, the Shockley case was a large case. It had multiple CDs in it. I took it that there were maybe videoed interviews that she had to go through, take notes of, get the file in order, that type of thing.
Okay. At some point, did he tell you that that Shockley case was taken away from her?
He did.
And do you remember when he told you that that had occurred?
March of 2016.
Okay. Did he recount the circumstances of how that occurred?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
Basically, the Person County office, Wallace Bradsher, Tyler Henderson, and maybe one other employee came to the office there and got the file.
Okay. Did he tell you about any conversations that occurred at that point?
I don't recall.
Okay. Before that Shockley case was taken back, did he tell you anything about Pam Bradsher? About whether she's working for him or what her role is in his office?
I don't recall what he said her role was.
Okay. Did he say that he had any problems with Pam Bradsher while she was working for him?
I don't believe so.
Okay. At some point, did he tell you that she no longer worked for him?
He did. He said that she separated employment August of 15.
Okay, so a year or so before, or the year before the Shockley case, she's gone.
That's correct.
Did he tell you about how he came to replace her in his office?
He said that he was contacted by Wallace Bradsher, who wanted to place Tyler Henderson in that role.
And can you tell us what the nature of that conversation was, if he told you? How it occurred?
What I remember of that was basically Craig said that Mr. Bradsher said he wanted to put Tyler in that role, and Craig said that he did push back a little bit, said, well, why don't I fill the role? And ultimately, Mr. Bradsher told him, no, let's do it this way, and he acquiesced to that.
And did he tell you if Tyler Henderson ever worked in his office?
I don't recall specifically asking him that, but the impression I got was that Tyler did not work in the office.
Okay. Now, was there some discussion with you about nursing school and tests and things like that?
There was.
Okay. Did Craig Blitzer tell you if anyone in his office assisted or took tests or classes for his wife?
He did.
What did he tell you?
He said that he assisted his wife. He said that another ADA named Spencer Morrow assisted her, and also I forget what Kyle Ambrose's position was, but also that Kyle Ambrose assisted.
Did he tell you if he knew at that point in time who was approving his wife's time?
I don't remember.
Did he tell you, and I know I'm jumping around, but did he tell you if he had heard from the defendant about Pam Bradsher leaving his office when she takes this new job?
I'm sorry, ask that one more time.
When Pam Bradsher quits working for Craig Blitzer, did Craig Blitzer tell you if he spoke to the defendant about that?
I apologize. If you could ask it a different way, or if there's anything that can refresh my memory.
Okay, if I may have one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
I approach, Your Honor, what I'm marking for identification purposes as State's Exhibit number 13. Take a moment, look at State's Exhibit number 13, having looked at, and after you've had a moment to look at it, if you'll let me know that you've looked at it. What do you recognize that to be?
This is the typed interview that I prepared after meeting with Mr. Blitzer.
This is your report regarding your interview with Craig Blitzer?
It is.
Okay. Would looking at that help refresh your recollection about some of the questions that I'm asking you?
It would.
Okay. So then, let's, in looking at that, let's ask you about something on page 7 there, if you want to turn to page 7. When Craig Blitzer and Wallace Bradsher met at the pizza place, did he tell you, or the restaurant in Reedsville, as you said, did he tell you anything about Wallace Bradsher asking for assurances?
He did.
What did he tell you about that?
He basically said that Mr. Bradsher wanted assurances that that his wife Pam wouldn't be terminated that she would not be terminated after Cindy Blitzer left
Cindy Blitzer left for what?
school.
Okay, so if Cindy Blitzer left, you're saying he said he wanted assurances that Pam Bradsher wouldn't be let go.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Now, to cut to the quick of it, I guess, did Wallace Bradsher or did Craig Blitzer ever tell you about a discussion that he and Wallace Bradsher had in April of 2016?
He did.
Okay. Was that did he ever tell you about a conversation involving Ocracoke Island?
He did.
Okay. What did he tell you the conversation about between Craig Blitzer and Wallace Bradsher contained? What did he tell you about that conversation?
He basically said that he was with with Wallace Bradsher. They were going to a district attorney's conference, and they actually talked about the fact that Mr. Bradsher had taken the Shockley file, and that was the one file that Ms. Blitzer had to work on, and she didn't have anything else to work on.
Okay. And when he told him that, did he recount to you what Wallace Bradsher's response was?
Yes, in general, something like tell her to concentrate on her schoolwork or something like that.
Okay. Now, did he tell you after that point on if Cindy Blitzer ever had anything else to do for Wallace Bradsher?
He did.
What did he tell you?
He said that after this point, Ms. Blitzer did not have anything else to do. She wasn't given any additional assignments.
Now, once the Shockley case was taken back, did he recount to you whether or not Cindy Blitzer ever had anything to do with Person or Caswell County?
He did. He suggested that she did not do anything else work-wise for them.
Okay. Did he tell you if he had ever, or if Cindy Blitzer had ever reached out to the defendant or his office to request further work?
He did.
And what was the reaction or response to them reaching out for these requests?
He indicated they did reach out to Mr. Bradsher, and I think also to Mr. Stoltz, and she wasn't given any additional assignments.
Okay. Did he indicate to you whether or not she continued to put time in?
He did.
And what did he tell you about her putting time in?
He said that she continued to put in her time, basically 8 hours a day, 5 days a week.
And did she continue to cash those checks, did he indicate?
He indicated she continued to receive her normal paycheck from administrative office of the courts.
And from that period of time on, did he tell you if they ever received any further work?
He did. He said that they didn't receive any additional work.
Now, did he tell you if he ever spoke to, after that Ocracoke Island conversation with the defendant?
He did.
What did he tell you?
He told us that, or he told me that there was a telephone conversation with Mr. Bradsher. He said that he was in his home with Cindy. They were on separate ends of their landline telephone, and they spoke with Mr. Bradsher.
Okay. If you remember what he told you that conversation was like, please describe that conversation to the jury.
Basically, Ms. Blitzer was wanting to resign. This was probably at the height of the media intensity with the investigation, and Mr. Blitzer indicated that Mr. Bradsher said, no, don't resign, that he would either take it to 12 or take it to a jury or something along those lines.
Okay. Did they say anything to you about him making any other suggestions to them?
There was some talk about special projects, that type of thing, and Mr. Blitzer indicated that they didn't know what he was talking about, that there were no special projects or that type of thing.
Okay. And did he recount, did you see his testimony?
I was with him.
No, did you see his testimony when he was in the courtroom?
Yes, I
Okay.
did.
Did you hear him recount this conversation?
Yes, sir.
Did you see him talk about sitting in the room and them being in different rooms?
Yes.
Is that how he recounted it to you?
Yes, sir.
Did he describe to you any motions or eye contact or communication between the two of them being Cindy and Craig, when this mention of special projects occurred?
He did say that they were within eyesight of each other, but they may have been, one of them may have been on the other side of a glass set of French doors, but they were in eyesight of each other, and they did kind of mime to each other. What's he talking about? Something along those lines.
Okay. Did Craig Blitzer ever recount to you conversations that he had with the defendant about the defendant wanting him to fire people?
He did.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that conversation was like?
He said that at some point Mr. Bradsher telephoned him and said that he had learned that a guy, an employee of Mr. Blitzer's, Mr. Keeney, who was the chief ADA in Rockingham County, had been informing to someone on Mr. Blitzer, and he should be fired.
Okay, and was that the end of the conversation?
I believe that was the end of maybe that conversation. There was another conversation a couple of days later where Mr. Bradsher spoke with Mr. Blitzer again and indicated that the informant was not Mr. Keeney, it was someone else in the office, and described him physically, and Mr. Blitzer indicated that he thought that he was describing Mr. Ramey.
Okay, and was that the end of that conversation?
There could have been more documented in the interview. That's all I recall off the top of my head.
Okay. Well, during that conversation, did he tell you anything about Debbie Hallbrook?
He did.
Okay. Did he ever tell you about Debbie Hallbrook or about Wallace Bradsher saying to him that he needed to fire, or that Wallace Bradsher fired Debbie Hallbrook for talking to the SBI?
He did.
He told you that?
Oh, I'm sorry. He said that, I believe he said that it had to do with the discovery issue, but I would like to look at that point if you know where it is in the.
I wasn't looking at it, so I'd have to find it as well, but
I found it.
okay. Well, looking at it, does that refresh your recollection of that conversation?
I'm sorry, I actually did not find it. Okay, I believe I found that section. If you could repeat the question.
Okay. Did Craig Blitzer ever say anything to you about Wallace Bradsher firing Debbie Hallbrook for talking to the SBI?
I don't recall.
You don't recall?
I recall that there was some discussion about the discovery issue.
Okay.
But maybe I documented that in another location in the interview. I don't know.
Okay. I'm not asking you if you documented it. Do you remember if he told you about that? It's a yes or no. And it's fine if you don't. But
I don't recall right now.
Okay.
I apologize.
all right. Did you ask him about Debbie Hallbrook talking to the SBI?
I don't recall.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Do you recall there ever being a conversation that Craig Blitzer recounts to you about Wallace Bradsher and Craig Blitzer talking about Cindy, where Wallace Bradsher ever mentions the phrase that Cindy should vary her time in Beacon.
I do.
Tell me about that conversation as you remember it.
I believe that was when he picked up the Shockley file,
Okay.
and it was just that Mr. Bradsher told Mr. Blitzer that Miss Blitzer should vary her hours in the Beacon system, meaning that she shouldn't put down 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. She should use other types of hours like sick time or vacation time, that type of thing.
Do you recall if Craig Blitzer told you how he took that?
Yes, he took it that she should put in that she's working not 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, make it look more like a normal person would input their time. Normal people have doctor's appointments, that type of thing.
Okay.
That's the way I took it.
That's the way you took it?
Yes, sir.
And is that the way he relayed it to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Ms. Latour, we're going to go ahead and break for lunch recess at this time, and we'll resume at 2:30. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you recall all the instructions, don't talk about the case among yourselves or with anyone else. Don't form or express opinions about the outcome. No media, no independent investigation into these matters, and no conversations with parties, witnesses, or lawyers. Leave your notepads in your chairs. Gather at the deliberation room at 2:30. And again, before I forget, to make sure that you have this information. So we've confirmed that there are high school graduations Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The first ones start at 8 o'clock in the morning, so that should not create a traffic issue. The next one starts at 12 p.m. So hopefully there won't be trouble getting into the deck. What we can't assure is whether there'll be space in the deck. So that may be the delay for you, but hopefully the traffic won't be too bad. So that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, same schedule, 8 a.m., 12 o'clock are the two graduations in the morning. Thank you. Everyone else, please remain seated while the jurors excuse themselves.